How are you doing, everybody, wherever you are? Welcome to our today's news from German. Ethiopia's loss of Red Sea access price of illegitimate transitional decision, says analysis decision taker by transitional political authorities. Ethiopia's loss of Red Sea access price of illegitimate transitional decision, says analysis decision taken by transitional political authorities without constitutional legitimacy and clear public mandate were responsible for Ethiopia's loss of direct access to the Red Sea. Geopolitical analyst Abiy said. Elias argued that the political transition following the 1991 fall of the Derg regime compromised Ethiopia's long-term strategic interest by finalizing Eritrean separation. The decision was made without secure and legally binding framework guaranteeing Ethiopian sovereign access to its historical ports. Particularly, Asabis pointed out, neither the political entity in Finfinne nor the administration in Asmara possessed the legal standing or parliamentary mandate required to relinquish Ethiopia's historical rights. Elias says he contended that Ethiopia's loss of maritime access was determined by transitional power structure rather than thought a full legitimate constitutional and sovereign process. Ethiopia became landlocked after Eritrea formally declared independence in 1993, losing direct access to the Red Sea through the ports of Asab and Massawa. Since then, more than 90% of the country's international trade has reported depended on the port of Djibouti, creating substantial reliance on a single maritime corridor. For Africa's second most populous country and one of the continent's major economies, Elias said, such dependence carries significant economic and strategic implications, including higher transportation costs, limited trade flexibility, and a higher vulnerability to disruptions along a single trade route. Elias further criticized the political context surrounding the 1993 referendum on Eritrea's independence, arguing that the choice presented to voters was politically framed in a manner that did not provide a genuinely balanced constitutional alternative. The Aukulan authority representing Ethiopians accept such as a flawed premise. He acts arguing that a legitimate referendum should have clearly offered voters the choice between independence and remaining part of the Ethiopia. According to Elias, the transitional authorities in Finfinne at the time lacked both the constitutional mandate and political legitimacy to make decisions with permanent consequences for Ethiopian sovereignty and strategic interests. Short-term political calculation and external diplomatic pressure, he said, ultimately prevented Ethiopians from pursuing the restoration of access to Assab, leaving the country with what he described as a major and enduring strategic disadvantage. The country maintained long-standing commercial and strategic connection with the region's coastline and its past. Following decades of armed conflict that ultimately ended with the fall of the Derg regime in 1991 and the emergence of transitional authorities in both Finfinne and Asmara, Eritrea's independence was formally declared following the 1993 referendum. Elias argued that the failure to establish a durable, legally binding arrangement guaranteed Ethiopian sovereign access to the Red Sea during the transition created a strategic imbalance whose consequences continue to shape Ethiopia's economic and geopolitical calculations. Against this historical and strategic backdrop, Ethiopia has in recent years intensive discussion on security, reliable access to the sea through principles of mutual benefits, partnerships, and shared development. The issue remains at the center of Ethiopia's abroad geopolitical debate, with growing calls for peaceful and mutual beneficial arrangement that reflect the country's geographical realities, historical connection, and legitimate economy and strategic interest. There is no salary. DRC health workers tell of hardship as Ebola spreads. Bunia Democratic Republic of Congo. The warning from World Health Organization is the current outbreak of the Ebola virus current spread in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo might be one of the world's worst, the agency has said over and over. In the worst outbreak on record, the hemoglobin viral disease killed more than 11,000 people in West Africa between 2014 and 2016. In the single largest outbreak from 2018 to 2020, 2,287 deaths were recorded in eastern DRC. Health authorities warned the outbreak could be even more widespread because the region is battling the rare Bundibugyo strain, which has no approved treatment or vaccine. Second, the disease had been transmitting for weeks without official detection before an outbreak was officially declared on May 15. Analysts point several wicked disease surveillance resulting from global health aid cuts in the past year. The virus is also spreading in eastern DRC, a region that is seeing protracted conflict and where distrust of authorities is high, making it hard to track suspected or confirmed cases. The epicenter is Ituri province, near the Uganda border. By July 21, more than 2,500 cases and 1,000 deaths had been recorded, according to World Health Organization. Uganda reported 20 cases and 2 deaths by July 16. Authorities say the last confirmed patients had recovered. By comparison, during the 2018 outbreak in the DRC, it took more than 10 months for the numbers of cases to reach 2,000. At the forefront of the fight to break the spread are health workers, dealing with the risk of getting infected, a shortage of personal protective equipment, and deadly attack from suspicious communities who do not believe in the virus and thus do not seek medical help. Many health workers also complained about unpaid salaries last week. Dozens at the Rwampara General Hospital down their tools in a streak. The hospital operates a major Ebola treatment center and is located close to the city of Bunia in Ituri. In May, parts of the center were burned down by hungry residents who also chased after health workers fleeing in trucks. Collapse red blocks internet blackout leave Pakistan. Kashmir in limbo. Muzaffarabad, Pakistan administer Kashmir. Zahir Iqbal remember exactly how much fuel it took to save his brother's life. First 2.5 liters to drive from hilltop village of Kerikor to the government hospital in Hazira, more than 10 kilometers away. A journey that took 1 hour. There another 5 liters brought by a cousin who drove more than 60 kilometers from Kotil city in 2-hour trip, so there was not enough petrol to continue to Pakistan capital Islamabad. It was the middle of the night and mid-June when Iqbal's eldest brother collapsed with chest pain in the village in Punch divisions in Pakistan administrator Kashmir, with an ambulance service reaching Kerikor, where most people travel on motorcycles on foot. Iqbal's two sons and other relatives carried his brother on a makeshift bed until they reached the nearest road. Eventually, they persuaded a friend to drive them when neighbors found petrol from the motorcycles to gather enough fuel for the journey to Hajra. At the government hospital, the limited staff could do little more than stabilize the patient. The doctors told the family he needed to be transferred immediately to a large hospital, preferably in Islamabad, about 140 kilometers away. A journey of nearly 4 hours. Another car had to be found, another further request, and another search for petrol began before Iqbal was finally able to take his brother to a government hospital in Islamabad, where he received treatment and is now recovered. Iqbal's order unfolded amid protest streaks and mobile and internet shutdown that have gripped Pakistan administrator Kashmir, formerly known as Jammu and Kashmir, and particularly its Punch division for the past 6 weeks. The unrest began in June after authorities banned the Joint Awam Action Committee, a coalition demanding the abolition of 12 legislative assembly seats reserved for Kashmir refugees. Among others, grieves bottom off from weeks of strict sit-in and clashes followed, the resulting is dozens of deaths, both of protesters and law enforcement personnel ahead of the first legislative assembly election, which is scheduled to begin in July 27. That's all for today's news. Thank you very much for you to be with us.